Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive. CRPGs used to be a mainstay, but let's get real, they weren't glitzy. Like with real-time strategy games, they're not the most immediately marketable type of thing, are they? Yet, as time went on, it's been clear that there's light at the end of a tunnel. For a while, the CRPG landscape looked dire. Ask any CRPG diehard, and they might have said that, we really hit peak in the 90s, right? Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, Might and Magic, Ultima. Thing is, after Baldur's Gate 2 released in the year 2000, the genre kind of went to bed. Sure, some smaller releases did happen, but as the industry went towards big, glitz, glam, photoreal games, CRPGs began to fall by the wayside. And to exemplify the push to broader markets, 2009 saw the release of Dragon Age Origins, a game that promised to carry a lot of the genre's old DNA. However, Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition were mainstream-focused action RPGs. Even Mass Effect slowly turned into an action shooter as its installments went on. So, why has the genre experienced such a resurgence, with many of its largest entries currently in development right now? Why did it seem to die? And what now, as we enter the 2020s, makes the future different? And if you like another genre, why is there hope for you? Now, if you're new here, then hello, we're a narrative game studio. Hit up our mailing list and site down below. We also do 6 game industry news and analysis videos per week, so sub for more, and seriously, that like button, ringing the bell, it certainly does help us out a lot with the algorithm. So thank you for that, and let's get going. There are so many genres that publishers all but abandoned, yet one of them appears to be well and truly back, the CRPG. Thanks to Kickstarter, this renaissance began. CRPG nostalgia hit Kickstarter with Pillars of Eternity's 2012 campaign, $4 million across nearly 74,000 backers. It released to critical acclaim in March of 2015, garnering immense praise for its engaging world and immersive writing, the elements that define good CRPGs. Now, those numbers seem impressive, right? They sort of are, okay, for a Kickstarter, but in other ways, they're not that big. They're not 6 to 15 million sales and years of recurring revenue. And that is why publishers have all but abandoned this genre. As gaming reached more and more people, well, most core games just got outscaled. Yet, that niche is large enough to both self-sustain and now even grow. Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire raised $4.4 million in FIG from 34,000 backers and later released to critical acclaim. And as this was happening, we began to see more and more projects appear. Mountain Blade was another shining star of the genre, with us now being at the cusp of its sequel's early access release. If 2012 was the start of the CRPG resurgence, then 2014 doubled down on that momentum. Might and Magic X Legacy, Divinity Original Sin, and Wasteland 2 all released within a few months of each other, alongside Shadowrun Dragonfall. So it's quite clear that the CRPG genre is only growing, that those dark ages seem to have ended. Those games that I mentioned were all received well, and many have got sequels on the works. Hell, take Divinity Original Sin 2. Over 1 million sales in its first 2 months, and insanely positive reviews. The quarterly earnings-driven big business all but forgot about this genre, yet once Kickstarter gave people the tools, players raised the genre back up. That is the power of platforms that enable people to coordinate towards common goals. And what has that led to? Well, it's led to the market proving its worth. The genre's power has now been justified to those with deep pockets, and that is what brings us on to more recent events. THQ Nordic released a playable demo showing off what a remaster of Gothic would look like. People loved it. They gave unanimous feedback that they wanted more, and now it has been announced that that game will enter full production. There's then the case of Baldur's Gate 3, likely the highest budget CRPG ever, and it's in development right now. Larian proved the genre and themselves as a studio with their Divinity series, and now they've secured funding to make their largest game ever. Since Divinity Original Sin, they've grown to 4 studios, 200 plus employees, and a team of 100 plus external devs to assist on Baldur's Gate 3. The pressure must be massive, both expectation and scale-wise. The studio sure has grown a lot. With all that money must come heightened financial expectations expectations, but I will say I trust nobody more to nail it than Larian. But that said, one must wonder if the project will stay very traditional and very nostalgic, or if they will go for more modern, simplified decisions in the game's direction. And if so, will we actually start to see a repeat of a typical cycle of a genre doing well, getting more money, becoming higher fidelity, more streamlined, and more marketable, often to the detriment of that genre's core? That could happen, and if it was any other studio, I would be worried, but given their track record, not with Larian. Certainly though, it does conjure up thoughts of Mass Effect, a tremendous franchise that was driven into the ground by EA. Of that, I have no doubt. Successive entries did improve aspects of combat, but they eroded the RPG core. Mass Effect 3 maybe played the smoothest, but it had the most simplified dialogue trees, the shortest development timeline, and overall was the rockiest experience of the trio, and that's not even mentioning the state of its ending. And that was all because EA drove the studio ludicrously hard to get their money fast. Larian aren't EA, and I do expect we'll get away with it in this instance. Of course though, if we zoom over to another pillar of this genre, we have Obsidian, who are owned by Microsoft. And given the past of Microsoft, yes, that could be worrying. But there are decent signs. Microsoft have shown their commitment to niche audiences through their investment in Age of Empires and Flight Sim. So it actually does remain possible, I would say, that Obsidian will get to keep on making what they love. So, with Divinity, with Wasteland, with Pillars of Eternity, and now Baldur's Gate actually happening 20 years after its past entry, what can we actually tell from this seeming resurgence of the CRPG genre? What does it actually mean? Well, I'd say thing number one. Making money is a bit of a game. The largest companies want to capture user time via hyper-expensive mass-market experiences. They are games that are risky in scope, but de-risked in terms of design. They are not the types of companies that we should be looking for experiences that are catered to what we really want, be that CRPG or otherwise. When they got their hands on genres like this, what have we seen? Well, that they've consistently streamlined the identity out of them and ran the franchises into the ground. And actually, in this instance, I am not against a bit of gatekeeping to actually ensure the integrity of the genre. Then there is production. I think this is a key learning and something that is not talked about enough. Content is king after all, and perhaps CRPGs, at least the top-down variety, work very well for production. It's a tried and tested genre. Asset-wise, it's very much a case of making tile sets and then building a world. There's a lot of work that, well, once the actual design is locked in, is rather production-friendly, that can be timetabled. Core mechanics likely won't hold these games back too far, as again, they are fairly well established. I expect that by having so much of the genre nailed down, great freedom is actually offered to developers where it really matters: creativity, storylines, the unique flair of every world, the world building. This especially applies for studios who actually aim to create an entry in a genre. Take a different situation like, say, Anthem, a big, high-budget project that's got to look utterly gorgeous, that's got to tick so many mass-market boxes, but also can't be too discriminatory or challenging in its mechanics and accessibility, i.e., it just has to be dumbed down a bit. That has led to no clear direction for that game, lots of reinventing the wheel in pre-production, and of course loads of technical experiments that we now know were not used, and 5 years essentially of wasted time. I think that's a very different situation to a studio saying, hey, we made Wasteland 2. Let's make Wasteland 3. Same for Pillars of Eternity. It just seems like these mid-budget, AA CRPGs are well-budgeted games that know exactly what they want to do, that know who their audience is, and actually manage quite regularly to succeed at their stated goals. That is absolutely wonderful for those companies and for the people who love those games, but for the likes of EA, well, it simply would not be enough. And to remember, Baldur's Gate 2, that was a BioWare game. And what do we see when EA takes a studio like BioWare? Well, of course, most recently, we saw Anthem, where in pursuit of a 10-year cash cow, EA managed to basically lose everything and come out behind. Of course, with Mass Effect, we saw them erode what the core of that was from entry to entry, taking away its RPG roots, simplifying its dialogue trees, all because they gave the team at BioWare the most short, ridiculous development cycles, especially for Mass Effect 3. And perhaps that's why we've seen so many ex-BioWare staff leave that company and join Wizards of the Coast's Archetype Games, who of course are trying to make more traditional role-playing games. And really for me, that is the lesson of today. How the top-end incentives of the industry, of the largest decision makers with the most money available, how their decision-making actually impacts what gets made and what we play. But how we, by actually voting for our wallets and supporting the games and the genres that we want to play, can change that tide. And I suppose how a democratization of game development and platforms like Kickstarter and the rising indie scene has actually allowed us to break away, because yes, CRPGs seemed a little bit dead, but it's not unsurprising that once the viability of indies and AAAs began to be more of a thing, we saw that niche genre have its resurgence. And indeed, if you look through the top played games in Steam, you see so much of this. You see games in genres that are just not touched by the largest companies in the industry that, obviously, have extremely good sales and extremely good positive feedback from their fans. Because at the end of the day, that is the strength of making a well-scoped, well-budgeted game with a clear audience in mind and not vying for the largest possible market that one could possibly get. Because it turns out that is what makes so much of AAA gaming a soulless and boring endeavor. So, there you go. I really hope you enjoyed that, and most importantly, whether you like CRPGs or not, I hope you can see how this likely does apply to the core of the genres that you love the most. Now, for us, developing a game, this has been a very interesting topic. We are making a choice-based narrative RPG that is primarily, it's not the most heavy gameplay-based game in the universe, right? So for us, it was super important to actually acknowledge that, to work out who our game is actually for, and instead of just trying to broaden the game and make it as marketable as we can, to actually just focus on the core essence that really matters to the people that we're actually making the game for. And I think it's that spirit for, say, CRPGs that has led to them being so beloved by the people who love them, and for us, really, that's what we plan to have be the core of our game. Now, of course, we're, trying our hardest to make everything look as good as it can, but we only have so much time. We only have so much budget, and thus far, the vast majority of the game has been self-funded. So that means that, we've got to work out how do we deliver the best possible experience for that core audience in the time that we've got? How do we actually create our production so that we can put the most effort into making characters, dialogue, and actually just those intimate interactions, like one-on-one talking with a character, and actually reinforcing the feeling of being a leader, the weight that's on your shoulders. How can we make everything serve that and not be trying to broaden things too much where it doesn't need to be broadened? So it's a very interesting lesson in game development. I think for me, really, it's all about working out who your audience is, what they actually love, and trying to really focus on that. And not trying to dilute things to try to get other people who are maybe lukewarm 50-50 in your game. Really, I think it all comes down to the concept of 1,000 true fans, which is something you can go and read about in your own time. But certainly, if you look at the emergence or the re-emergence of the CRPG, and many of the genres that have just done better in Kickstarter, even board games, say it is that 1,000 true fans concept, where if you make something for a small amount of people who really love it, they will take that baton and they will keep on running with it because you're actually there trying to make something that they love. And I think that is just a part of that AAA that sometimes does get lost in the mass marketing, yada, yada, yada. You know what I mean. So there you go. If you'd like to check out more of our game, you can check out the links down below. If you want more stuff in the channel, be sure to hit that sub button. And if you want to help us out with the algorithm, hit that like button. So there you go. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.